this year, the streets that you see outside here in Cleveland, Ohio, were covered with snow. And we had a chance to interview the city's 31-year-old mayor, Mr. Dennis Kucinich, by two-railing from Los Angeles. He was here at our studios at WKYC-TV in Cleveland. And I said to him, when the weather breaks, Mayor, we will come back to Cleveland and we'll try and do an interview with you in Tony's Diner on the west side of Cleveland on 117th Street. Do an interview with you in a place where you have breakfast every morning with your friends, members of your administration, and talk about what's really happening in Cleveland. Well, the time to fulfill that promise came this weekend. We all came to Cleveland over the weekend. And by coincidence only, Mayor Kucinich faced a recall election here in this city yesterday. And as you probably have heard now or read in newspapers, that out of 120,000 votes cast, the mayor carried the recall. He stays in office by only 275 votes. So needless to say, the newspapers here this morning, television stations, radio stations, are speculating on what that small margin means. The mayor has been quiet. He was up late last night, but he is here today. We will talk with this young man about what the experience of facing a recall has meant to him and how he plans now to coalesce this city, one of America's great eastern cities, into some sort of unification following a divisive recall campaign. A little bit later on, we have three members of the press here in Cleveland, and curiously, the newspapers and television stations here editorialized against Mayor Kucinich, so he'll be here with some of his critics today. We have Dorothy Fuldheim with us, who was first on this program in April of 1975. She is a political commentator for the ABC television station in Cleveland, which is WEWS-TV. She has worked there for the past 35 years. She supported Dennis Kucinich in the election last November. She was a voice on his behalf against the recall this summer. Also with us is Mr. Tom Vail, a native of Cleveland, Ohio, who has been publisher and editor of one of this country's better newspapers, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, for the past 15 years. His newspaper supported Mr. Kucinich in the November campaign, but came out against him during the recall. Joining us also is Mr. Herb Camm, the associate editor of the Cleveland Press and host of his own television program on Cleveland's public television station, WVIZ. Herb's paper did not support Mr. Kucinich in either the mayoral race last November or the recall campaign this year, so there is a certain degree of consistency in his position. It's curious to watch election returns on Sunday night. We were watching here last night in the hotel, and they put the little flashcaster across the bottom, letters indicating what the vote totals are. And about 9:30, as the paper ballots began to be counted, Kucinich had 52%, the recall 48%. Then about a half an hour later, with about 75%, Kucinich's lead began to dwindle until finally it became apparent there would be a possible recount later on this week. And I think right before the 11 o'clock news, Kucinich had 50.1%, and the recall had 49.9%. It was that close, very exciting to watch. But the man who made most of it happen is here with us today on Tomorrow. His name is Dennis Kucinich, the mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, and we'll be right back with him after these words from our sponsors, and I hope you'll all stay tuned. Thank you. August 14th, 1978, still the mayor of Cleveland. I heard on the radio this morning, the mayor by the skin of his teeth. Do you accept that judgment that you just barely squeaked through, that you pulled it off, that you sneaked by him?
When I won election in November, I won by about 1%, and this was bound to be a close election. 275 votes, good
out of 120,000 cast, and that's close. And it also means that nearly 1 out of 2 people in this city were quite willing to let Dennis Kucinich go. How do you feel about those people this morning?
Well, my challenge to convert my critics, and I think that if given the chance to do so, I will, and the people of Cleveland have given me that opportunity, and I would suppose that by the completion of my first term, I would be able to win many of the people over who voted against me.
Well, let me take you back to 1977, last November, when you won election, when you were inaugurated, when you said that it was going to be a new day for Cleveland, for the working people, for the poor people, that you were their candidate. And you said nobody ever solved the city's problems by firing a police chief, which I believe your predecessor did. He had trouble with the police department. You hired Dick Hongisto out of San Francisco. You subsequently fired him. You became bogged down in controversy. Why did all those things happen?
Well, first of all, with respect to this being a new day for the poor and the working people, that still holds true, because my administration has unfailingly championed the cause of Cleveland's poor and working people by promoting economic policies such as making big business pay a fair share of the taxes, working to save a municipal light system, expanded consumer protection, to name a few. And these things are basic economic issues which are important to Clevelanders. So one of the reasons why I received a lot of flack was because I stood up for those people who traditionally have been excluded from the political process, by wealthy special interest groups who had friends in politics and manipulated politics to their own personal gain. So I was under attack by the very same self-serving special interest groups who, for the most part, tried to exclude me from being elected in November.
What is a special interest group? That's a phrase politicians adore using, special interest groups. Aren't working people special interests? Aren't poor people special interests?
When a group has goals and hopes which are compatible with one's own basic philosophy and one's own constituency, that can be a special interest group which you can stand up for. However, what often happens in politics is that most politicians forget their constituency and end up serving someone else because the other individuals happen to have more economic clout. Government ends up being a ripoff then. And I've tried to change that. And by attempting to challenge the status quo, I've received some strong resistance by individuals who have never run into any opposition from government in any way, and they just expect government to be a handmaiden of the establishment. And I don't think it has to be that way. There has to be give and take, certainly, but the give and take also has to include the people.
You had trouble with the police here early on, so you brought in Hangisto. He was your guy. You brought him in here, and you held him up to the people of this city as the man who was going to keep the Cleveland police force on its toes and operated in alignment with your policies as chief executive of this big city. And then you fired him. You fired your own guy. You couldn't get along with him. So don't tell me about establishment in Cleveland that you can't get along with. You couldn't get along with the fellow that you brought in here.
But I had high hopes for him, but he didn't want to recognize the fact that the mayor has to make the decisions. And I had great hopes for the former chief, but when he wouldn't...
Knuckle under?
No, not knuckle under. I brought him in here to help clean up the police department, and he ended up trying to be buddy-buddy with everybody and from the top on down, and really wasn't in a position to effect the kind of changes that were necessary to make the department responsive to the people. He wanted to be popular with the police, but a chief may not be able to do that if he's going to be effective in trying to get the police off their duffs and out there responding quickly when people call.
And he didn't want to do that. He didn't want police to respond?
No, he was more interested in currying favor with the police bureaucracy than he was in trying to change what is a rigid bureaucracy which has defied change for many years and which had no interest in giving minorities more of an opportunity, which had no interest in seeing the police department responsive to civilian control. And what he did was to assure that the police department would continue to be run by the ranking officers instead of carrying out the policies that I wanted them to. It's unfortunate, but...
Where were you at odds with this man, Hangisto? Was it that he was simply trying to curry favor with police department establishment?
No, the odds started and finished when he made a number of false charges against me and my administration. And it's like this, when you're the mayor of a city or any other office holder and you bring somebody in and he's part of your team and he turns around and knifes you, and I didn't know why. What could I do? He made the choice. I'm sure things could have worked out if he hadn't gone to the extent of trying to attack me for things that
Would you take him back if you came asking?
I think that the question is pretty much closed at this point.
Would you take him back if he came asking?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't? No. Now here you have Dennis Kucinich, who fights the city council, who fights the establishment, who fights those who have ripped off the poor people in the working class, who fights his police chief. You're a fighter, Dennis Kucinich. You're a scrapper. Who do you get along with in the estate? Don't you have to get along with somebody at that city hall to make this whole thing, this megalopolis, work?
Well, actually, I do get along with a lot of people. But the people I get along with, for the most part, have been excluded from consideration by government. And they're the ones who yesterday, on Sunday, came to the polls and were certain that I stayed as mayor. I get along with senior citizens. I get along with members of organized labor here. I get along with young people, get along with minorities, get along with ethnics. But I don't get along with the big business establishment, with the utilities, with the banks, with the editors, and the very...
City council?
Well, yes, but you know, the problems with the council didn't start until the recall was actually in process, and it became a political barroom brawl. And had there not been a recall, my relationship with council wouldn't have been so tempestuous.
With a margin of 275 votes, don't you have to do something? Don't you have to make some shifts in your policy? Don't you have to take a little bit of a different approach? You can't just hang tough anymore, can you? Don't you have to do something to bring those people on?
No, I'm going to make initiatives for conciliation, but I cannot compromise the basic economic policies which I'm developing here in Cleveland, which seek to have the resources of government finally delivered to those who need help the most. And I'm talking again about poor people, working people, and also a middle class which is rapidly disappearing because of inflation and rising taxes. Somebody has to speak out and represent those interests first. And I think the government really hasn't been doing a job for that group, and I decided in my administration that I would.
Yet, even with that decision, I read that your bonds are in trouble, that your financial base here is in trouble.
Well, anyone who knows anything about municipal finance knows that...
And I don't.
But here's what I'm getting at. The banks, in an effort to try to get me out of office, helped to create a credit problem for the city. That doesn't mean that we didn't have a problem to begin with, but they wouldn't cooperate in helping me resolve it because I won't shine the shoes of the presidents of the various banks. Now, people...
Wouldn't you make sure the shoes fit, never mind shining them?
No, that isn't the way it works here, though. They want a mayor to toady up, and I won't do that. People put me in there. I stand at an equal level to anybody, regardless of what their station is. And, you know, people's mayor is on level with everyone, and on par with any other power in the community. But it hasn't been that way, because the special interest groups who had controlled city government for many years expected me to genuflect at their altar the minute I was elected. And it can't be that way in a democracy. People, regardless of what their particular economic station happens to be, should be equal, except that the inequities brought about by the maldistribution of wealth and city government's lack of a willingness to do anything about it have intensified people's feelings of frustration and anxiety about government's capacity to serve their needs. And what I'm trying to do is just get government to work, just get government to serve the practical aspirations. You know, through all these problems in Cleveland, city services have not declined. City services did not stop. We were able to continue our efforts to try to build new sewers, start new recreation centers, new fire stations, clean out the sewers, fix up the lights. Streets are in best condition they've been in 40 years. These are things that count, too.
I would have hated to have seen them 35 years ago.
Right.
I have to pause for these words from our NBC stations. We'll continue with Dennis Kucinich from Tony's Diner in Cleveland after these announcements. You talk and eat at the same time now?
Walk and chew gum at the same time.
I know a former politician who could not. The last time that we talked, you said that anybody who came here and mentioned that they saw you on this show would get a free key to the city. Now, how many of you had to give away?
Over 2,000. I really believe it. You wonder why our city has financial problems. But they came in from all over the country, and I've never had such response. And it still holds true.
Last night in your little talk over at the hotel, you said that you realized your imperfections. Did you not?
Yeah.
What are those? Nobody's 100% right. And you sound sometimes as if you believe you are 100% right. Like everybody's out of step but Dennis. The press is out of step, the utilities are out of step, the banks are out of step, but you're in step.
Well, now, if that were true and I was elected by one vote, people still put me here, maybe that would indicate that I was right. But I'm not saying that. My supporters know best that I'm not perfect. You've probably heard that line about your friends are those who know everything about you and like you just the same. And I suppose that holds true for me, especially in Cleveland.
Your friends are the ones who know all your faults, and if they had any, you'd know theirs. Those are your friends. But where do you think you fault? Looking back over the last 6 months, if you could do some things differently, if there were shortcomings that you saw, not necessarily in yourself, but in your modus operandi, your administration, what would they be?
I think there's some problems with matters of style, and those can be worked out. On the substantive issues, which are economic, I think that we've been right on target. I think we've been right where we should be for the people of Cleveland in terms of trying to keep taxes low, improve government services, making sure business pays its own freight charges. As far as my own self, every day you live and learn. And again, I never pretend to be perfect.
What have you learned?
I've learned that if you really believe in what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you're being attacked by every power that be. Stay by the people and they'll support you.
How would this interview have been different if it had been 275 the other way? What if you just missed it? Then you have to sit down and say, you know, if I hadn't had this squabble, or if I hadn't done this...
Oh, no, I don't do that. No, I don't. The thing that I never do is I don't try to recut every day and take a look at it and walk around and see, oh, can this be different? No, you live and learn. If, you know, winning and losing are opposite sides of the same coin in politics. No one wins them all, no one loses them all. And you can't equate victory or defeat with your ideals and your beliefs. If you really believe in something, there's no such thing as a defeat. You keep on hoping to find your ideals fulfilled. Archimedes once said, give me a place to stand, and I can move...
And a lever long enough.
Move the world. Mm-hmm. And I have a place to stand through the grace of God and the will of the people of Cleveland, and I will be able to help people.
You know, you use this phrase, the will of the people of Cleveland. 50.1 to 50.2%. There were half who ruled otherwise. Don't you have to get them on their side?
Well,
I haven't yet heard you say, and it's been 18 hours now, you know, for all who voted against me, I promise you folks, I'm going to change the ways that you didn't like. I'm going to try and shape up. I'm going to shape up this administration or whatever it is. I mean, that you have to hold out a carrot to these people and say, hey, the war is over now. You know, the battle's over.
I think you're right.
But why don't you do that?
I have.
When? I haven't seen it.
Well, I'll say it again. For all those who are watching and didn't support me, I'll try harder to live up to your expectations of what a mayor should be. And I hope to continue to merit the confidence of those who did support me. Again, sure, things can be better, but I wasn't really given a chance to begin with. There were people who came in and tried to knock me out right from the beginning, principally because they couldn't stand having someone who was going to speak out and talk about some basic economic inequities which government had ignored for many years. And you know, when poor people and working people start having a stronger voice, a lot of people get scared. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason to fear that.
Always get scared.
I understand that, but what the heck? The haves, big business establishment, they've had some of the best politicians money can buy, and they have their representation. So why shouldn't the other side have theirs too?
Have another bite of the problem. You talk about the have-nots, and you use the phrase, the unequal distribution of wealth. How can you redistribute wealth more equitably?
Reform the income tax code, making sure people pay their fair share. We know that
you have income tax in Cleveland, city income tax.
That's right, but that's not the real problem. The problem's at the federal level. And
you're not a federal official.
No, but that's an issue, though. It's really an issue. We don't have progressive city income tax, and I'm not necessarily advocating that because the city has to make do with a limited amount of income. The real problem of that goes to a state and a federal level. But that's where the maldistribution of wealth starts, at the federal level, where corporations can make millions of dollars and not pay any taxes on it. I'm all for the free enterprise system, mind you, but I'm opposed to monopoly. I'm opposed to people not paying their fair share. Same thing with the property taxes. There's an increasing problem where the burden of taxation is being shifted onto the backs of the middle class and on down the economic ladder from those who have the great economic clout and wherewithal. And that is a serious problem in this country, and if somebody doesn't start addressing it pretty soon in very sharp and clear tones, we're going to find that people's confidence in democracy could wane. And it's very important that government begin to take some steps to see to it that individuals have an opportunity to share the fruits of their labor. And we're finding increasingly that they are not, and that government is using the great wealth they have to help those who already don't need help. And I want to see individuals be able to pay a fair share of the taxes, and I don't want to see the middle class and the working people, poor people, have to bear all the burden without people up the ladder paying their fair share. I'm just advocating justice.
Men like John Lindsay, Abraham Bean, Tom Bradley, Sam Yorty, your predecessors, Carl Stokes, Ralph Perk, have said on occasion that governing a big city in America today is a nearly impossible task. How impossible do you think it is? How is this job different from your perceptions of it before you got it?
Impossible just takes a little longer. I don't believe that cities are impossible to govern. The basic problems of cities can be resolved, but they can only be resolved through being candid about where the problems lie, and the problems are economic to begin with. There are certain systemic problems which can be overcome through rooting out the intransigence and the bureaucracy and trying to see to it that everyone does their share of work. I went through City Hall on a tour about a few weeks after I became mayor. I found people sleeping at their desk. One guy was in the attic at 11 a.m. playing the trumpet. The name wasn't Gabriel. And you get, we had one fellow who was an inspector in the community development department, and we went out looking for him one day. He was at a bar.
Probably inspecting.
No, he was the bartender. Oh. And he was on the city payroll. Now, that's the kind of problems that you can face. And that problem is not, I'm not exaggerating it. It is a problem which so permeates government that somebody somewhere has to put their foot down and say, look, we can't do things this way anymore. The taxpayers are entitled to a full return on their tax dollar. But when you do that, when you upset the status quo of the City Hall bureaucracy, you're also creating some hard feelings from politicians or pretenders to politics who have never had to work an honest day's work in their life. Now, there's no reason why political bureaucracy or governmental bureaucracy needs to be unresponsive to the people. I think government can work, and I don't think that it's a hopeless mess. It's just that people are told it is so that they don't try to demand their fair share.
I'll let you go back to that for a second. We will continue with the mayor of Cleveland from Ohio after these words from our sponsors. I was just talking with Mayor Kucinich here last night when the election was over and all the paper ballots. Now, they haven't had paper ballots here for 10 years. Huh?
Right.
But they had them yesterday on a Sunday election, just special for your honor, right?
That's right.
So anyway, it was announced by the Elections Commission that the Cleveland Police Department would be guarding the ballot boxes overnight because the election was so close. And considering your problems with the police department in the past, I wondered how comfortable you felt having Cleveland's finest guard your paper ballots.
I have great confidence that the outcome of this election will not change.
From what does that confidence arise?
From the fact that my supporters are very strong.
And what about the possibility here of recount? Now, they have to certify this vote over the next 3 or 4 days.
It's automatic.
Okay.
Anytime the margin is so slim, there's a recount. And the first time I ran for office, I had a recount.
Did you sweat that recount at all?
Win by one vote, it's all right.
But what if the 275 start slipping away in a recount?
They won't.
Yeah, but what if?
If I get an honest count, they won't.
But what if?
Well, then maybe we got to go to court. Maybe we got to check people's fingernails.
Would you do that?
Look, I'm not going to let the city government be stolen from the people.
You know,
It won't be. I wouldn't get upset about it.
There's a story, you know, that Nixon in 1960 ballot boxes in Cook County, Illinois, that there was some flim-flam there with the late Mayor Daley, and that Nixon was thinking about asking for a recount. His advisors pressed him to do it, and he said, look, why tear the country apart for 100,000 votes? If this is the will of the people, this is the will of the people. So I say what if, it's all hypothetical, but would you let the city be torn apart with a long court battle?
Cook County's a great place, and so is Cuyahoga County. There's not going to be any problems with those ballots.
Okay. What's the first thing you do when you go back to work this morning? You finish breakfast.
2 phone calls to people who've been calling this morning. You know, I answer my phones the first hour of every day from 8 to 9:30. And I received calls before we did this show from people all over the country who wanted to find out how they could get into the diner for your show.
The diner's full up today.
Yes, it is.
Staff changes. Any?
Any organization, in order to maintain a healthy
must
balance,
adjust itself. Yeah, especially if it's been through a recall. I understand that, you know. They had to fix the Pinto. Maybe you're going to have to fix your car a little bit, you know.
That's what a recall is all about.
Yeah, your gas tank was highly explosive up until a couple of days ago.
Well, I would expect some changes.
What about the people? You don't want to talk yet about who you're going to change. I noticed that your Cleveland reporters last night were talking about some sisters that work for you. I forget their name.
Well, Betty Gradina was the person who managed my campaign. She and her sister are brilliant young ladies.
Don't know them.
Well, they are brilliant, and they were hardworking. And had it not been for the fact that A, they were young, and B, they were women, they wouldn't have received a lot of the criticism they were receiving. There's some stereotypes that have to be overcome, and my administration is working to do that. We've been able to achieve great progress in terms of representation at the policy-making levels. We have 4 Jews in the cabinet, 4 blacks, and 4 ethnics. Now, that's a balance that's, I think, healthy for a community which needs infusion of new ideas and needs to represent people who had been excluded from the process.
Will you mention the song that you would have played on the jukebox if this had gone the other way, or shall I?
You did this to me before.
Well,
you mentioned it.
Well, he said that if he had lost, he was going to come in here. It is alleged that the mayor said, had he lost, he would have come in here and pushed number, what number is that there?
164?
That he would have played song number 164, Johnny Paycheck singing Take This Job and Shove It. And I swear, that's the mayor.